So hi everyone. In this video, we'll basically understand on how to think about prompting. Prompting or prompt engineering is one of the most essential skills that you should be knowing when you're building an AI agent. Prompting basically enables you to get things done from LLM. It basically helps you understand on how you can communicate more efficiently with an LLM so that you get more consistent outputs, right? So this is really helpful to understand the correct structure of writing a prompt, to understand how an LLM perceives your prompt and how an LLM thinks about your prompt. So once you have this understanding, once you give clear instructions, your output is always much more better, consistent, and efficient. So let's get into this, right? So the step one for writing on how you should think about writing prompt if you have a use case in your mind, this is funnily enough, it's to not just start writing prompts. To write a good prompt, you need to have a clear understanding of your use case and what is the scope of your use case that you're trying to solve here. You should have a very clear understanding of what problem are you solving, why are you using an LLM in this, what output do you need from this LLM, what is the specific goal of this agent or this specific LLM call, who is the end user, what do you need from this prompt. First, take a pen, paper, or probably a notepad to just have a list of these things sorted in your head. That why are you actually writing a prompt? What is this specific thing that you're solving from this, right? Once you are done with defining the use case, it's uh, also advisable and it's very necessary to understand the definition of your output. When you're calling an LLM, when you're building an agent, what is the ideal output that you would want? Now, in terms of ideal output, of course, there are a set of instructions that you'll be giving to the LLM to give that output to you. But I'm also talking about the format of this output, whether you need a text format, if you need a JSON format. If it is a text format, what is the word limit that you need? Uh, and do you need it in bullet points? Do you need it in separate paragraphs? Do you want the paragraphs to be separated? Right? So these are a lot of things that you can brainstorm because LLM does not really know what kind of output is ideal to you. Only you know that. So it's always better to list down each and every minute detail about that output that you want so that you can ultimately add that as instructions to your prompt. The next step is, so this is not a mandatory step, but this is highly advisable. So a lot of these LLM providers, whether it's OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, they share the best prompt writing practices in their API documentations. So it's always advisable to have a read, just go through those documentations where they have mentioned about writing good prompts. That always helps you. For example, I was writing a prompt where I was using Anthropic's Claude. So I saw a very interesting thing there that they suggest you to use XML tags when you are using input in the same prompt. When you have a variable input in the same prompt and you segregate it using XML tags, that helps the Claude, which is the LLM model, to clearly separate the prompt context with that input. Because, for example, if my prompt is, let's say, 100 words long and my input, the variable input, is just another 3 or 4 words additional to that prompt, the very high chances that my prompt might overlook those 3 to 4 words which are super important to me, right? So if I separate them with these XML tags, they probably help me. So these are some advices that these LLM providers themselves provide in these documentations, which are always good to go through before writing the prompt. Now, once you have your use case probably properly defined, you have your output defined, you have also read the documentation, then it's time to start actually writing the prompt. And before writing the prompt, it's always better to have a skeleton of how your prompt will look like. So a skeleton that I would advise you would be start with giving LLM some context about what your use case is. Then it always helps to define a clear role, like assign a persona to the LLM, that you are a senior marketing analyst, for example, or you are an SQL analyst, for example. You are an expert in so and so field. So these initials always help when you clearly define what that LLM has to act now, right? Then you should always state your actions very clearly in pointers, keeping very crisp and short sentences, right? You should clearly mention what is the primary task, be super confident while giving these instructions. Because if you yourself are not confident while giving those instructions, the LLM would probably hallucinate or give inconsistent outputs, right? Keep as less scope for ambiguity as possible. This would really help you. Then now, of course, chain of thought, which is a very advisable practice when it comes to prompt engineering. Treat your LLM model as a 6 7 year old kid that you are, accompanying while doing your task. So it's always advisable to teach LLM on how to think. You should explicitly ask the LLM to think step by step, or just think how you are reasoning about this. Outline your own reasoning if you have complex tasks. So, of course, if you have a use case where you want an LLM to think in a certain way, then decide in a certain way, and then probably give output in a certain way. So these are three different set of instructions that you are asking the LLM to do. And if you clearly mention just give me this output, and you have not mentioned on how the LLM should think, or how the LLM should prioritize, what logic should the LLM use while defining that output, you'll probably not get the output that you're expecting. So it's always advisable to use these chain of thoughts. Clearly explain the LLM on how it should think before giving the output, what all actions it should do before giving you an output. Then you should always specify a format and tone. As I also mentioned in the step 2, which was defining the output, you should clearly mention what sort of format do you need, and also what sort of tone do you need. So, for example, if you are making a conversational chatbot, and if you're making it for some enterprise, you would want the tone to be very professional. If you are making it for some casual conversations, you should mention that talk to me like you're talking to me on WhatsApp, for example, right? So when you specify these format and tone, the output looks very similar to how you expect it to be. Then this is a bonus tip that you can also ask the prompt itself to self-correct and refine. Like, consider adding the last step for the LLM to review and critique its own output. Basically, you can ask it to self-reflect before publishing the final output, right? And the ultimate guide to writing the best prompts is to keep iterating, keep testing, keep iterating. Have a list of use cases. We'll cover that again in further in this video. Have a list of use cases. Just keep on testing more and more times. So that is when you will actually get a good enough prompt to launch on your production, right? The next step is to probably add some examples. So this is there's no clear answer to how many examples you should add. Again, it depends on how many iterations you have done. Try to cover all sort of different outputs that you can possibly get from that LLM in that use case in at least one example each. So if you have five different kinds of outputs that you can get from that LLM, try to give five different sort of examples on how the input would be in that scenario and how ideally the LLM should respond, right? The next step again comes as implementing guardrails. So this is really important, and this is often overlooked by prompt engineers. So you should always have a list of pointers in your head on what the AI should avoid doing, what the AI should be restricted in. You have to define the boundaries for the AI. For example, again, if you have a marketing analyst agent that you're building, you have to make sure that the LLM only answers queries related to marketing analyst, right? So if I'm asking the LLM on which is the best car for me, it should not probably give me any answer. It should reply to me that I am a marketing analyst. I can only answer marketing analyst related stuff. So it's very important to define this. And of course, when we're talking about safe and responsible AI, there are always a lot of topics and concerns that the LLM should never indulge in, right? So let it be politics, let it be violence, and a lot of other stuff that the LLM must never indulge in. So it's always good to clearly lay out these instructions as part of the prompt. The next step is to design test cases. Now, this is a pretty boring, but this is a really important task. Like, if you really want to get a prompt to be published into production and have actual users use that prompt, this is a very crucial step. Like before launching the prompt on production, you should have a huge list of test cases that you must test the prompt with. And these test cases should not only include the obvious inputs that you're expecting to get, but these test cases should also include all the edge cases. This should also include what you have asked LLM to not to reply with, right? So this has to be a very uh, this will be a tedious exercise, but this is super super important, right? Again, like this point is pretty much a bonus tip. This will help you reduce your LLM cost. So again, when I mentioned referring documentation of these LLM providers, they also mention how to cache your prompts. Prompt caching basically helps you reduce costs. So for example, if you have a 100 word prompt and around 80 or 90 words from that prompt are pretty much constant, or even if 50 words from that prompt are pretty much constant in each and every LLM call, you should probably place them on top. All the variable inputs, or all the variables that you're giving in that prompt should be after that static part of the prompt. So what will happen is that when you're repeatedly calling that LLM, that static part would be cached and the input tokens won't be counted every time. So that would help you save a lot of cost. Now I also listed, 2 to 3 bonus tips that are, majorly from my own experience. This is a problem that generally prompt engineer face, that when you're expecting an output from an LLM, what it does is that it adds a phrase like "here's your output" or "this is the response," and then gives the actual response that you need. But when you're doing in production, you don't really need that phrase, so you can add an instruction like "no preambles," which will prevent the LLM from giving those phrases. Again, like when we are talking to LLMs, the language is not what we use in our day-to-day conversation. Mostly, it's not like that. Or probably when you're using some low-cost models, the language is sounds a bit robotic. So when you add a phrase like "use third-grade English," which will enforce the LLM to use very simple conversational English or whatever language you want to use, this definitely helps. And then again, so when we are iterating the prompt, what we end up writing a very long prompt, and we might have had some redundant information in the prompt. You might have given the same instruction 2 or 3 times in the prompt. That will not only impact your costing, but that can also impact some sort of hallucination in the prompt. And again, like redundancy is one part, the other part is contradiction. There are possibilities when you have written a huge prompt that you have asked the LLM to do a certain thing in one part, and you have yourself contradicted that own instruction. So it's always better to use LLM itself. Like what I do is that I use GPT and I ask GPT to read this prompt and find out if there are any redundancies or contradictions. So that always helps before you are launching your prompt to the production. So that was pretty much it in this video. Thank you guys.